Good morning. I'm Ted Hiscox, and as chairman of the North Wessex Downs AONB partnership, I welcome you to this annual forum and thank you for your interest in our work. This is our opportunity to tell you about some of what we've been doing to conserve and enhance this nationally designated landscape, which is our responsibility to safeguard and promote. Our new way of life has reinforced just how important our countryside is for our physical, mental, and social well-being. But that in turn has created some new challenges. The current pandemic has forced us to reformat this forum. We're using pre-recorded film and live presentations, and incidentally, I'm live. But I do hope that what you're about to see and hear maintains our standards for imparting knowledge and information, and that you will leave with a degree of hope and optimism, and perhaps a desire to get involved. If you do wish to become more active, we would certainly like to hear from you. Before we get going, there are a few housekeeping points that I need to cover. Only our speakers can be seen and heard, so if you would like to ask a question at any time, click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen to open the panel. Then you can type in your points. We have 2 open forum sessions, and we aim to answer as many of your questions as there is time. Of course, you can always get in touch with the AONB team throughout the year to ask questions. All the contact details are on our website. We're going to break for 11s halfway through the morning, and the second half of the forum will start at 11:15. Finally, we're recording the whole of this event, and everyone will be sent a link for it next week. Our last forum was held in November 2019, which seems an age away. We were in the Elizabethan splendour of Englefield House near Reading. And from what we gathered afterwards, the day really was regarded as a great success. Many of you with us now were present then. We got off to a good start because of the glorious parkland setting, our impressive speakers, and a record attendance. In fact, there were so many people wanting to attend that we had to close the booking early. Today, we're faced with a very different setup, but it has one advantage. There's no limit on numbers. And once again, we've broken a forum record. As of yesterday, we had over 180 people registered to attend, double what might normally be expected. And at this point, I would just like to thank especially Anna Trant of AT Events, who's looking after all the technical side of today's forum, and I think is based in Devon. So we've knowledgeable speakers who are on the front line of their respective projects and areas of concern, and all being well, we will end the forum with some live words from our special guest, who I much look forward to introducing. In case your programme is not to hand, we have divided the morning into 3. Henry Oliver, our director, will start by giving us a brief overview of the past year and a look at what lies ahead. We will then turn our attention to nature recovery. Then after a short break, we have 2 sessions on landscape enhancement. So Henry, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of some of the things we've been up to over the last year or so, including the impact of coronavirus on our work and how we've responded. as well as a quick look at what we have planned for the coming year. Those of you who were with us at our forum in November 2019 will remember that we published our new management plan then. This is the statutory 5-year AONB management plan produced by the AONB partnership. And a new thing in that plan is a focus on priorities for public investment in land management support, focused on different landscape character types, preparing us for the new environmental land management support system. We were all set to go with our new work programme, and then of course, like everyone else, we were turned upside down by lockdown and coronavirus in March last year. There were some particular casualties, including the Walking Festival in the summer, which was cancelled, our first ever Dark Skies Festival in the autumn, also cancelled, and having just secured facilitation funding for our Southern Streams and Ridgeway farmer groups, the events and engagement programme of those groups having been put on hold in March and largely since. The tourism industry has been very hard hit by the pandemic, and our promotion of the area through the Great West Way destination touring route and our distribution of our new visitor leaflet, you see a picture of here, were both curtailed. And our Mend the Gap collaborative programme with the Chilterns in the Thames Valley struggled to move to the delivery stage because of restrictions. A particular casualty of the year was our Land of the White Horses project. White horses are an iconic feature of the North Wessex Downs, and in February 2020, we had just got, after a year of development, to the stage of submitting our development stage bid for a large project covering a whole range of aspects of white horses to the National Lottery Heritage Fund. The following month, because of coronavirus, NLHF withdrew our bid, and it's been under review, but essentially it's been on hold since. We responded to the situation by closing our office. The team have been operating remotely. Our partnership meetings have moved online. We've focused our social media and website messaging, particularly at the beginning of the first lockdown, on coronavirus messages and coordinating that through the National Association for AONBs with the network of AONB comms officers. We reviewed our leaflets to make sure we weren't encouraging people to go on walks where they couldn't maintain distance from other people. And we've managed to recruit online as well. Eva Prokop left us in May, and we are happy to say we recruited Corinna Woodall as our new Senior Project Development and Funding Officer. And we've also managed to recruit a new chair of the AONB partnership, Sarah Nichols, who will be succeeding Ted Hiscox in March. Our annual review was published online only, and our forum became a virtual forum and was postponed until today. We reviewed our work programme to shift our resources towards the sorts of things that we could do whilst working remotely. In particular, we were aware of our website as our shop window, if you like, on the world, and we were having stability problems with that. We've addressed those successfully, thanks to the help of Harry Bell, our web contractor. And we've started to develop an entirely new website, which has been identified as a priority by the partnership. We have finished working on our landscape colour design guide, which is going to be a fantastic asset in our planning work, thanks to Jem Waygood for his work on that. We've been working hard on our good lighting guide, producing a new dark skies leaflet and display materials. We managed to run a virtual Dark Skies Festival with the help of Marlborough Town Council and Marlborough College in place of the real festival we had planned. And we've been producing some right tree, right place guidance in the face of increasing pressure for tree planting across the AONB. Also, insofar as we've been able, we've been continuing to provide farmer and land manager support and engagement, helping at least one more farmer cluster to come together during the year. Looking ahead at the year ahead, We are going to continue to develop our nature recovery plan for the North Wessex Downs. Along with other AONBs, we're committed to producing one of these under the Colchester Declaration. And alongside that, we'll be refining the environmental land management priorities for the AONB, as well as working with farmers and land managers to see about how we can deliver those priorities. We're commissioning a habitat survey along the entire length of the Ridgeway National Trail with the Ridgeway Partnership to identify priorities for conservation project work. And we will be publishing our Right Tree, Right Place guidance to try to ensure that new tree planting across the AONB works with AONB objectives, supporting wildlife and landscape character rather than detracting from them. We're going to place increased emphasis on our undergrounding programme with SSE for the low voltage electricity lines that scar the landscape. And we're going to be working on 3 major projects, which you'll be hearing more about shortly. Sparkling Streams is our Green Recovery Challenge Fund project aimed at river restoration, improving water quality and enabling public engagement with nature across the Dun, the Shalbourne and the Kennet rivers. Roundway Hill Visual Impact Provision is National Grid's programme to put underground a high voltage line and line of pylons at the western end of the AONB near Devizes. And Mend the Gap is our collaborative programme with Network Rail funding with Chilterns AONB and the local Railway Action Group to try to heal the scars left by the Great Western Railway electrification in the Thames Valley. We have a new strategic focus on the value of our landscape for health and well-being, and particularly encouraging walking, access and enjoyment and understanding of the AONB landscape. And a central part of that will be our new website, which we're looking to commission very shortly. And that sits alongside our new leaflet that you saw earlier. We are hoping to run an online walking promotion later in the year in place of our walking festival. And we'll be publishing our Good Lighting Guide alongside Dark Skies policy guidance. We're still hoping to run our first Dark Skies Festival for real this October with Marlborough Town Council, and we'll be extending our small grants funds aimed at enabling local communities to bring forward projects which help achieve nature recovery and landscape enhancement objectives. And in response to demand from local authorities, we'll also be providing online AONB training for local authority officers and members. Now, I can't finish without giving a huge vote of thanks to the AONB team. This is the single occasion during the year since March when we've actually managed to get together and meet, and you'll see there's a suitably socially distanced walk in progress. A couple of members of the team aren't in that picture. One of them was on leave and the other one was taking the photo, so thank you to Anne for that. I just want to pay tribute to the way they've adapted to a completely new way of working whilst continuing to run partnership meetings and to provide high quality output of work across a whole range of issues. And also I want to thank Ted Hiscox for his support as chairman of the partnership, Councillor Paul Miller, who chairs the management working group, all the members of the partnership, the management working group, and all our other partners, and the volunteers of the North Wessex Downs Landscape Trust for their support during the year. Thank you, and we look forward to working with you in the year ahead. Now, finally, nature recovery is a key theme of today, and I'm happy to say we now have a message from Marion Spain, Chief Executive of Natural England, about nature recovery. And our thanks to Surrey Hills AONB and Natural England for enabling this film. Thank you all very much.
My name's Marion Spain and I'm the Chief Executive of Natural England. Natural England, of course, is the government's conservation body, and we've recently refreshed our mission and our vision, and now we're all about nature recovery. More nature, more people connected with nature. I do what I do because I fundamentally believe in the value of nature for people. It's about our health, it's about our well-being, it's nature contributing to the economy. So I love nature, but I recognise that not everybody loves it for its own sake. My job is all about helping people understand what nature can do for them and helping them reap the benefits. One answer to why nature recovery is important is because we've lost so much nature. But to me, it's not just about statistics, it's not just about the numbers and the indicators and the misery stats, as a colleague of mine calls them. It's because nature is good for us. We need nature in our lives. And if the COVID crisis has taught us anything, we also need nature close to home. We need to take action now, not just because we are seeing ever more frightening numbers about the decline of nature, but we need to take action now because we have an opportunity, we have a generation, we have a society who has realised through the COVID crisis the benefits that nature can bring them. We need to capitalise on that and give people what they need and want. If we're going to recover nature, we need to get three things right, and they all handily begin with M. So we need motivation, money and maps. We need people who want to put nature back, not just because it's good for them, but because it's good for our economy and for our society. We will also need some money to make the changes to our land and sea use to restore nature. Nature itself doesn't cost us, but managing nature and restoring nature will need some upfront investment. And we also need some maps. We need to understand where the best opportunities are to recover nature, where we can make the most impact through a national nature recovery framework. But we also need local nature recovery strategies that will allow communities, landowners, farmers to really work together to think about where they want nature.
Thank you, Marion. Now we're going to tell you about sparkling streams, which is a central part of our work on nature recovery in the North Wessex Downs. In September last year, the Heritage Fund launched its Green Recovery Challenge Fund, which is funded by DEFRA. And the following 6 weeks saw frenzied activity led by our Senior Project Development and Funding Officer, Corinna Woodall, and our Project Officer, Jackie Acombe, to develop a bid for the Sparkling Streams project alongside our partners, Action for the River Kennet, the Town and Manor of Hungerford, the Southern Streams Farmer Group and the Environment Agency. At the end of November, we were delighted to learn that we'd been successful with a grant offer of £400,000 from NLHF. Sparkling Streams will work with land managers on a catchment scale to tackle water quality and restore river channels on the Dun, the Shalbourne and the Kennet. Our objectives are cleaner water, more wildlife, and to better connect people with nature. Now we have a film to tell you more. Sparkling Streams is a partnership between farmers, volunteers, charities, government agencies and the North Wessex Downs AWIN-B partnership to enhance biodiversity and tackle water quality on a landscape scale in the catchments of the River Dun and the River Shalbourne flowing into the River Kennet. The North Wessex Downs, cornerstone of southern England's chalk landscapes and a designated area of outstanding natural beauty.
I'm George Hosier. I farm here at Wexcombe at the top of the catchment of the Dun and the Shal. What we do up here at the top of the catchment has an impact further down the river. So if we are allowing soil to leave our fields and go down the ditches and into the rivers, that has a knock-on effect to the health and well-being of the river further downstream. 6 years ago here at Wexcombe, we changed the practices of tillage and how we establish a crop. We've moved away from all cultivations and we plant everything directly into the residue left behind the combine. We farm in a way that we are trying to improve our soil health by keeping the soil covered all year round. I'm standing here in a field in November time, which is covered in a multi-species cover crop, which we've planted to keep the soil protected and alive from the end of harvest in August until we plant a crop of spring barley in here in March or April next year. We're looking after the biodiversity above ground and below ground and trying to build our soil, which will in turn hold more water, filter any nasties out of the water and allow it to percolate down into the soil and down into the aquifers below us. This allows for the water to travel more slowly to the river and be cleaner when it gets there. As rainwater hits the soil, it does so more slowly because it's slowed down by the leaves and any other residues on top of the soil. The soil is our greatest asset as a farmer and we need to hold on to it. And when it leaves our farm, it becomes a problem.
My name's David Lemon. I farm at Wilton near Marlborough. We're based in the lower point here where the North Wessex Down catchment from Wexcombe runs down to here from the hosiers, and the Pewsey Vale comes down this way as well. All the water congregates through two channels that come farm through here, and 3 years ago we built a sediment pond to try and capture some of the water. Downstream we've seen the local duck pond filling up with silt, which then flows into Wilton water, which has been silting up, and that goes out into the River Dun. We've also had local flooding, so it's been really important to me to try and do something we can about it upstream. So we set up a cluster group of farmers about 3 years ago, which we named Southern Streams. There's 25,000 acres of farmland, all with a similar mindset. So Southern Streams has a priority of water management, biodiversity, soil management, woodland management, and even actually communication. So I'm glad to be doing this video. Where this water comes down from Wexcombe and joins at the end of this pond here, we are wanting to divert that into this field here to create a marshland. So about half of the field that you can see there will be dragged back and the water will all congregate here and we'll create a marsh bed for various reasons. One, it'll capture a huge amount of carbon. Two, it will filter the water far better, so we'll capture even more sediment. And three, of course, it'll be a wonderful haven for wildlife. This is the first of 3 sediment ponds that we've built in a system that goes in through the back of our farmyard and then down into the village duck pond and then on into the lake. We've got phosphate, nitrate, and I think the other big thing is soil sediment running downstream. The River's Dun and the River Shall feed into the Kennet. It's a chalk stream, it's a triple SI. It's really important to keep that as healthy a ground as we possibly can. So by catching sediment upstream, we can prevent it going downstream. Here we are at the village duck pond in Wilton, and the success story is that you can see to the bottom of the pond, which typically after a lot of rain, this would just be a brown silty mess. The fact that you can see the bottom means that the sediment ponds are working upstream. Here we are at Wilton Water. It's a 7-acre lake. It's a spring-fed lake, but it has various streams that come into it. What we've done on our farm so far is one stream that comes into the lake with the sediment ponds. And with sparkling streams, we hope to be able to do more to more of the land around here to protect the water that comes into this, which ultimately goes into the Dun, which then goes into the River Kennet. What we do upstream has a massive effect on the quality of the water downstream. One of the things we've done as a cluster group of farmers with Southern Streams is testing the water to see the quality and the purity of the water. And very interestingly, testing it at different places after different things. For example, the sewage works that comes into here, we are able to test the water and work out really where are our problems coming from. Here we are in a typical field of greensand on our farm, where we've taken the farming away from the watercourse that runs down through the middle of it. Being on green sand, we have a soil that likes to run if it gets saturated, and it's inherently high in phosphate, it's fertile ground. So there used to be a 6-metre margin here, and when I went into countryside stewardship, I was able to use the options of 12-metre water buffer zones to extend the margins wider to take the farming away from the watercourse.
Hello, I'm Charlotte Hitchmoo. I'm Director at Action for the River Kennet. We're here by the banks of the River Shalbourne, which is one of the unloved rivers of our catchment, really. It's one of the poorest performing in terms of its Water Framework Directive status, so we look at rivers to see how good they are environmentally, and this one really is failing. But it's a relatively easy fix if we all work together, and we have a vision to work with landowners and riparian owners and the community to really make a difference and bring these streams back to life. So the first thing you notice when you get into this bit of the river at the top of the Shalbourne here is how much silt there is on the bottom of the river. And if you're a trout or a grayling or any sort of small fish that wants to spawn in the bottom of the river, you need clear gravel, and this amount of sediment just makes it impossible for fish to breed. One of the things we'll be looking at doing is creating some flow deflectors to speed up a central channel that will clean itself. If we can narrow the flow, we can make the river do the work, and we'll be able to flush through a lot of this sediment. And of course that sediment's coming in over hundreds of years off fields that have drained into this river for years and years, and that's why it's so important to be working with farmers and landowners to change management practices so that we can keep the sediment and the soil on the fields and out of the river. This is a section of channel that's been modified over time to make it straight and uniform, and you end up with a very U-shaped channel, very little diversity, and in terms of creatures that want to live here, there's one type of habitat, and what we want to do is create a really diverse habitat so that there's slow flowing areas where small fry can shelter, so that there are marginal areas with good vegetation, so there's lots for water vole to eat, and if we can get a mixture of fast and slow, deep and shallow, we just create all these little niches for different creatures to live. In addition to habitat work here, we're also looking at fish passage to make sure that fish can swim freely from the bottom of the river right up to the top of the river. So we're just close to the sewage treatment works here, and this is one of the many sewage treatment works across the country that discharges, on occasion, untreated sewage into the river. So when there's just too much rainwater and foul water in the system, the sewage treatment works can't cope and they have to overflow into the river untreated sewage. So one of the things that we're looking at is ways we can reduce the quantity, the volume of water that ends up in the sewer network. So we'll be working with the primary school to put a rain garden into their primary school, and the rain garden will include lots of ideas people can pick up and copy at home in their own gardens to keep rainwater out of the sewer network, which will reduce the burden on the system and reduce the number of times that the sewers have to overflow into the river just to cope with the volume. So one of the other activities we'll be doing, and are already doing, is testing the water quality in the river. So we're testing nitrate, phosphate, and how turbid the water is. And we're using a really simple test kit. The Southern Streams Farmer Group are testing the waterways in their own farm areas, and then we've got ARC volunteers testing water quality the rest of the way down both the Shalbourne and the Dun. And that gives us a really good idea of where specific sources of pollution are coming from, and by testing regularly and building a time series, we can start to see whether there are fluctuations across the season or fluctuations in places in time. So slowly we're building a picture of where the cleaner areas are and where the dirtier areas are, and that helps us take action to work out whether we can reduce those inputs.
I'm Robert Nightstar, riverkeeper to the town and manor of Hungerford. The town and manor of Hungerford is an ancient estate, and we are part of the Southern Streams Farmers Group. This part of the Kennet that we're in today, historically has been very, very impounded for certainly several hundred years by the mill downstream of us. However, after a collapse in the structure at the mill, this section of river now flows much more naturally. So where I'm stood, this used to be a silty riverbed, no weed growth at all, very, very poor section of river. Now, The river's been flowing freely for the last 3 years. The habitat has completely changed. You can see the benefits. You've got good flow, you've got good weed growth, you've got a clean riverbed. During the proposed project, this is the type of habitat which we wish to create on a much longer section of River Kennet, and also within the historic river channel. We aim to create another 600 to 700 metres of this type of habitat. A chalk stream like this is basically it's an artery of life through a landscape. Clean, pure water is the lifeblood of the river. The river feeds much of what's around it. So a healthy river, a healthy environment produces a healthy fishery, and a healthy fishery is what we need to create the income to help maintain these environments. I'm now stood in the original course of the River Kennet, prior to a mill being built several centuries ago. This section of river, it's very degraded, it's full of silt, very little flow, very poor for invertebrates at the moment, very poor for fish life. Part of the Sparkling Streams initiative is to put more water down this channel and to create at least another 600 yards of prime chalk stream habitat. Chalk stream habitat is incredibly rare. I'm possibly now stood within 150 miles of in excess of 80% of all the world's chalk streams. So allowing easier access for fish to migrate up this stream is very, very important, because the ancient mill structure, the sluice gates, the weir, have been a barrier to fish passage in this area of the River Kennet, possibly since the 13th or 14th century. When we've restored the historic channel, that will enable us to re-wet these meadows, Undies meadows. There's in excess of 50 acres here. So basically there's an opportunity here of these meadows, which have been far too dry for far too many years, to be reconnected to the riverine corridor. So we're going to reconnect the river to the floodplain, which will re-wet the meadows, which will give us the opportunity to build a nature reserve which will be of great value to the local community as well as the wildlife we anticipate to live within it.
Sparkling Streams, a vision for nature recovery in the North Wessex Downs.
We now have the first of our question and answer sessions. Do ask any questions on what you've just seen and the general work of the AONB team, which Henry Oliver told us about a little earlier. Remember, click on the Q&A icon at the base of your screen to open the Q&A box, then type in your question. The panel will do their best to answer as many questions as we have time for. So on the panel, we have Charlotte Hitchmo, Director of Action for the River Kennet, ARC, Andy Smith, Natural England's Area Manager for Thames and Solent, which includes about half of the North Wessex Downs, and Corinna Woodall, Senior Project Development and Funding Officer for our own AONB. So over to you, Henry.
Thank you very much, Ted. I'm happy to say we already have a number of questions. So thank you to those of you who are putting them in. Bear with me as we find our way through. I think we already have a couple of planning questions which don't relate directly to nature recovery, and I'll just ask Rebecca Davis, our planning lead, to give her a little bit of notice that we'll be coming in with a question for her in a moment. But first we have an easy question. I think one for you, Corinna. Caroline Culver says, please could you provide a web link and contact details for the Sparkling Streams initiative? Will we be doing that through the notes from this meeting?
Yes, we can provide that. That's a very easy thing to do. We've already got a web page devoted to the Sparkling Streams project that is already up on our web page, so we can provide a link, and we'll be trying to keep that updated. And also we anticipate having various social media promotions as well. So probably on a monthly basis, there should be updates on the progress of this project as well. So if you do Facebook or Instagram, you should be able to keep track with what's happening, but we will be updating our web pages on the A&B website as well.
Okay, thank you very much. This, I think, is probably a question aimed more at you, Charlotte, but I don't know. Maggie Lewis asks, how can parish councils encourage, brackets, make, question mark, riparian owners improve the river course on their own land?
I think get them to talk to ARC. So we work with all riparian owners to help them make their river better. There are certain rules that the Environment Agency set out, depending whether the river's in a SSSI or not. Natural England also have quite strong power. So if somebody's doing something that's clearly wrong, like dredging a short stream, or then it's a cut and dry matter of it just being illegal. But much more positively, there's lots and lots we can do. So I think if you think that there's a bit of river that could be improved, talk to me and we'll see what we can do, because our job is to help people make the best of the rivers that they've got, and we can help them both practically and to find funding.
Thank you very much. We've got a question we heard in the Sparkling Streams film about sediment, and we've got a question from Tom Oliver. Are there plans as to what happens to the sediment once it is flushed out of the Shalbourne? And with the sediment ponds at Wilton, will this be returned to the land from whence it has come? Is that a question for you, Charlotte, or is it more for Corinna? I leave it to you. Who wants to come in on that one?
I can start with the water that's in the river. Once the sediment starts moving in the river, it generally just keeps moving down the river. So once we can get it suspended, it will move down the river, and it'll stop in the next place that there's a low flow. But getting that sediment moving to the top of the system and getting those clear gravel areas will help. And by improving the habitat along the whole river, we just keep sediment moving. So rivers' jobs are to move sediment. Sediment in river is a normal, sensible, positive thing. It's just when there's too much of it coming in for the river to be able to move with the power that it's got. So good habitat will keep the sediment moving. And you're right, the sediment ponds will need managing and emptying at intervals. So the ones we've got so far typically need emptying every 5 years or so, and we've been able to put that back on the land close to where they've close. So that what I'm saying is we're not exporting sediment out to another farm. It's being spread on the land locally.
Thank you, Charlotte. Corinna, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Charlotte's covered everything. But I think it does just show that this project, once we've perhaps developed these habitat enhancements and put these elements in, the work doesn't stop. Basically, it's an ongoing commitment to maintaining these structures, because sort of managing the input into the rivers is an ongoing thing. So I think we're very sort of grateful to our Southern Streams farmers for committing to this, because it's not just a question of putting in an installation and then that's the project done and walking away. This is something that needs constant and active ongoing management.
Thank you very much. We have a question, another one about Sparkling Streams. Have we got any input to Sparkling Streams, not just financial, but in terms of abstraction management? A very good question from the water companies. I'm sorry to come to you again, Charlotte, but I think this is probably one with your name on it.
So we have done a lot of work on the Kennet catchment itself, looking at abstraction and the impact of abstraction, and successfully, but after over 20 years, managed to get the abstraction at Axford reduced. Through their WINEP programme, the Environment Agency have tasked Thames Water with looking at the impacts of abstraction right at the very top of the Kennet. So that's a piece of research that's happening now, where we think that abstraction is damaging the environment. We can start to create a body of evidence and have conversations with the water companies and the Environment Agency, but it's complicated and it takes a long time. Having said that, Thames Water have made some very strong commitments to protecting chalk streams and reducing abstraction where there's damage to chalk streams as a result. So we're holding them to their word and making sure that they do as much as they can, whilst recognising that it's us that's turning on the taps to use the water. So that it's a balance, you know, it's a societal issue as well as just a blaming water companies issue. But yes, we're really aware of it, and there is progress, but it is painfully slow.
Thank you. We've got a question on a slightly different subject now from Trevor Cherrett, who says, wonderful action for landscape and nature. Are you doing anything? Oops, sorry, my screen's just clocked up there, just to take the question away from me at the crucial moment. Sorry about this. Are you doing anything with or for the people who live in the AONB? Who would like to answer that question? Any takers?
Can I answer it with just quickly with regard to sparkling streams? There is a big element of community outreach within sparkling streams. So we're doing a rain garden for the primary school at Shalbourne Primary School. We'll be doing rain garden workshops for the community, and the habitat restoration along the Dun and the Shalbourne has got opportunities, COVID permitting, for volunteer work parties and for the communities to get involved. So that's within the Southern Streams bits of what we're doing.
Yes, and Henry, I could
like to say more about that. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think when we talk about nature recovery and the great opportunities that we have now, and the fact that I think a lot is about to change in terms of how we approach the management of nature and look for the potential to really improve nature on a larger scale, that's got to start with local communities. I think the whole approach to nature recovery is based upon understanding what the issues are locally and learning from local people. And I think what was really interesting about that film we've just seen, and how the best advocates are the people who live here and know the land and know how things are managed. And the farmers who spoke in that film, I mean, it was so genuine, wasn't it? And the thorough understanding that they have of how their land works and how one thing affects another. And that kind of connectedness of nature, I think, is something that local people know best. So I think in terms of how we go forward now with the big legislation changes that are happening, local people and their input to the local nature recovery strategies and how people can enjoy nature on their doorstep, I think is going to be absolutely key.
Thank you. Corinna.
I think there will be so many opportunities to engage people and share the wonderful aspects of the AONB that we have with people through sort of nature recovery. But I think there will be other opportunities just sort of broadening out a bit from nature recovery to more of our sort of important heritage that we have within the AONB. So I will be sort of picking up the Land of the White Horse again and reviewing that. And I think probably having been disappointed at having to withdraw that application, I think COVID has also given us an opportunity to review that, to see if there are more opportunities to engage people both with nature, but also with some of the sort of more historic monuments and historic places that we have in the AONB. And that's already sort of perhaps opened up some discussions about the potential for some monument management schemes that we might be developing with Historic England, which will enable people to get out there and volunteer, again, COVID permitting. And obviously, we were hoping to open up the walking festival. That's probably not going to happen this year, but certainly creating more opportunities and promoting some of our fantastic walking country is something that we will definitely be working on as we go forward in this year. So I think certainly the greater emphasis on health and well-being and how important this our wonderful landscape and nature is for people's health and well-being has really been brought home in COVID. And I think that's a message that we as the AONB team have really taken on board as well.
Thank you very much. In a moment, I'm going to come to Becky to ask her a couple of questions about planning that have arisen. But one more, I think, probably for you at this stage, Corinna, and Andy may want to come in on this one too. Paul Beavers says the Hampshire Downs Natural Character Area spans the North Wessex Downs AONB and the South Downs National Park. Given government support for enhancing and connecting landscapes, as well as nature recovery networks, is any work taking place to link the North Wessex Downs AONB and the South Downs National Park?
Yes, so we have been working over many years. There's been a notion for a concept called the Big Chalk, and that really looks at trying to connect all the chalk landscapes from down in the southeast of England, from Kent all the way up through the South Downs and up to the North Wessex Downs, into the Cotswolds, into the Chilterns. This concept has been packaged in various different ways over the years, but we are working collectively with AONBs and national parks to look at how we can most effectively take our sort of hotspots that we have, you know, our protected landscapes, and what the most effective way will be to try to increase the connectivity and enable sort of movement and enhancement for species, and look at the opportunities that we have to increase and, you know, deliver on nature recovery. But the chalk landscapes are very special, but perhaps sort of been neglected, been looked over in the past, but they are so important for such a high percentage of our flora and fauna that we have in this country. So I think we're all doing individual things as our individual protected landscapes or national landscapes, but working collectively and looking at those places in between, there are certainly really good opportunities. And I think some of the developments that are coming forward, looking at farming in the protected landscapes and perhaps giving us some resources to be able to begin to deliver more effectively on that, should mean that we can really make some inroads in connecting our chalk landscapes.
Thank you. Andy, do you want to come in on that?
Yes, I just might add, it's a really excellent question, because that really hits upon the need for that join up and that we don't have forgotten places. And I think, you know, we have some fabulous protected landscapes, but Henry, you'll know very well that the family of AONBs want to work with the national parks. And as a consequence of the Glover review, you can see that it's intended that it all fits together into a coherent whole, so that these protected landscapes do work together and link up. And it's about that nature connectivity that Corinna talked about, that actually it all makes sense as a whole. And when you hear increasingly people talk about the nature recovery network, that is all about a national framework looking at that connectivity of nature, rather than just looking at these isolated landscapes with their kind of administrative boundaries, and looking beyond and how it all connects together. So I think we can be very optimistic about how partnerships will look beyond their own boundaries and how it all works together and make sure that places aren't forgotten. And I'm thinking also about, you know, nature is important across the board, not just within these protected landscapes, and it really matters to people who live there as well. So I think it does look very promising.
Thank you. Paul, I can vouch for the fact that, as you probably know, in your area, there is considerable local interest in some form of landscape designation, possibly for land in the Hampshire Downs between the two protected landscapes. And if you look back at the original designation history of the North Wessex Downs, that area is in the frame as one of the areas worthy of designation. So it's a really interesting thing. We do really struggle in our own boundaries with our resources, never mind reaching out beyond, but we are very keen to do that, because clearly ecological networks pay no attention to AONB boundaries. So thank you for the question. Right, I'm going to come to Susan Cocker's question. She's been the model of efficiency by posting her question 4 minutes before the forum actually opened. Thank you for your patience. This is one for you, Rebecca. if you could switch your audio on and your camera if you're able to, please. As parish councillors, this is Rebecca Davis, our Principal Landscape and Planning Officer, everybody.
Morning.
As parish councillors or members of neighbourhood development plan committees, it's sometimes difficult to frame responses to development in the AUNB. For example, what evidence is required to show economic need outweighs the impact of development, housing or industrial on the landscape?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a tricky one. Often the onus is on the developer to demonstrate that there's an economic need, which is one of the tests for major development. So they would employ, sorry, hold on, okay. They would employ, you know, a consultant to carry out an economic assessment to demonstrate that there is a need. They would, as part of that, have to consider whether there's any other alternative sites, which is always a big one that I tend to pick up on, because I find that those consultants seem to forget that element. And then they have to show that there is a significant need. And we've been lucky in kind of opposing a few. For example, one of the major ones outside of Swindon, it wasn't in one of the industrial allocated sites. They hadn't demonstrated that there was no other alternative location. So that was quite a good one, and did get opposed by the local authority and dismissed by the committee. But then once that assessment is done, it's down to the council. So the council will either use someone in-house, but most commonly they'll employ a consultant of their own to assess that assessment and to consider whether, you know, they've been able to demonstrate an economic need. You know, just simply putting a shop in a development doesn't mean there's an economic need, as most of the community would demonstrate in their objections. You know, they don't want a shop. So yeah, I mean, that's the case really, in order to do it. And it is very difficult, you know, when something goes to committee as well. Sometimes some members, you know, will kind of read between the lines on some economic assessment. So it's really important that the local authority, you know, are quite clear when they're addressing those assessments. But the key thing is it has to outweigh, any of those benefits have to outweigh landscape harm. So for us, you know, they've got to be pretty huge benefits.
Thank you very much, Becky. That's great. Right, we have a huge number of questions coming in. We're not going to be able to answer them all, but we'll work our way through them. We have a question from Neil Bucknell. Are you getting ready to relaunch the Ridgeway Farmer Cluster when lockdown eases? And has anything come of the idea of extending it eastwards, possibly to the Pang Valley, as was being discussed last March? I think possibly I'm best placed to answer that question, if that's all right. Yes, we are doing our best to get the Ridgeway Farmer Cluster back up and running. It has suffered from lockdown. The facilitator, Tors Brown, was furloughed for much of the period, and we are in discussion about that at the moment. And yes, we are very interested in collaborating with farmers in the Pang Valley. I think it's likely to be a number of smaller farmer-led groups rather than extending the Ridgeway to the Pang Valley. And we are just about to start providing a limited amount of support to the lower Pang farmers to help them with their plans to come together. And if and when we can find the resources, we hope to be working with the upper Pang farmers too. And some of those areas, particularly the lower Pang, overlap with the Mend the Gap programme area that we'll be hearing more about later. So I hope that answers that question. Peter Orr, coming back to the rivers, is the plan for the Shalbourne, to introduce species after you've taken steps to increase flow, or for them to populate the stream naturally as conditions improve? I think this is probably one for you, Charlotte. You're muted, Charlotte. You're being very polite.
It was bound to happen. Very much, it's the plan that the natural repopulation will happen, and wherever else we have created habitat, you know, the stuff has come. And the classic example is water bowls. You know, you create water bowl habitat, and miraculously they arrive, because there are parts of the catchment that are really very healthy. So there is the opportunity for species to move. I suppose the one key thing is fish passage. You know, we do need to sort out fish passage, and part of this project is to remove some barriers, and the other is to get feasibility studies in place so that beyond the scope of this project we can remove the barriers that we can't remove as part of this project. But connectivity is really important, but we're not planning to introduce species.
Thank you. Beavers will come later, possibly, arguably. Next year's forum. We have a question from Nick Tomalin. This may be one for you, Corinna, or perhaps for everybody actually on the panel. Are you planning to export your findings and experience from the Sparkling Streams project to other landscapes with chalk stream interest? I guess this links to the big chalk pilot that Corinna's already mentioned. Corinna, do you want to kick us off on that?
Yes, and I think what has struck us in this project coming together is how eminently replicable it is. So I think anything that we learn from this, we definitely want to try to capture and to be able to showcase and to be able to share what we found and our findings, really. Being a National Lottery Heritage Fund managed and administered project, it does involve basically doing a lot of monitoring and careful evaluation, and so hopefully we will make sure that we'll be capturing any learnings from this. And I think we would be delighted if there are other catchments that would like to learn from what we've been doing on the Kennet, Dun and Shalbourne. And I think, as you say, there are really clear links to some of the initiatives and work that we'll be taking forward through the Big Chalk programme as well. So yes, I think hopefully this sort of smallish project here can perhaps have a bigger impact right across our chalk landscapes in the southeast.
Can I add one tiny thing? Sorry, Henry. I was just going to add one tiny thing to that, which is that this is the application of the catchment-based approach, which is a very tried and tested way of working, and it shows the strength of catchment partnerships and thinking of rivers not just as rivers, but the whole catchment and valleys that they sit in, and none of us can do it by ourselves. It's all about partnership, and that it just working together increases the output of the project so massively.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, we've probably just about got time for one or two more. Richard Bellamy asks, why do you not encourage water companies to separate the rainwater from the sewage? I think this is one for you again, Charlotte. Natural England, I don't know.
Well, I suppose one of the things that rain gardens do is exactly that. It takes the rainwater and allows it to soak into the ground within the property boundary. So whether that's a playground or a domestic garden or an office block, so effectively that's kind of retrofit suds. And the other answer is we do, but it involves replumbing the whole of Britain because the drainage and sewer network has grown up in a very higgledy-piggledy way over time. Natural England could probably talk more about the kind of legislative way, but in our own kind of Rivers Trust way, we're doing what we can where we can, but really it's a kind of societal issue that will require massive investment.
Yes, I think it's work in progress, Henry. I mean, we work very closely with the water companies to make sure that they are working in the best way for the natural environment, and on a number of fronts. And it's paying dividends, but clearly they've got a job to do as well, and their priorities and their funding issues as well. But I think it is changing. And when we talk about partnership, then of course we're talking about partnership with private companies and water companies and utilities. And we are working very closely with them and with the Environment Agency as well, so within the regulations and legislation that we have available to us. So again, I think government has switched on to this and are making sure that water companies are being held to account and putting the regulations in place to make that happen.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm afraid, I'm very sorry to say we're out of time. We could go on for at least another half an hour. So I'm going to thank all of you who've asked questions very much for your questions. I'm sorry that we haven't managed to get onto all of them. We will do our best if we can to answer some more of them through the text before the end of the meeting. So keep an eye on that if you've got a question outstanding. But if you are desperate for an answer to something that doesn't get answered today, please feel free to get in touch with us direct at info@northwessexdowns.org.uk. And special thanks to all our panelists. Thank you very much. Can I ask you please now to switch off your cameras and microphones? Except I think for Corinna. And now it falls to me to introduce the next item. Nature recovery planning is a particular focus for the year ahead for the AONB, and identifying key species for conservation action is part of that. Next, Corinna is going to say more about that, and there'll be an opportunity for you to participate at the end. Over to you, Corinna.
Apologies, the video is just frozen. Bear with me 2 seconds.
This is the obligatory technical hitch without which no virtual presentation is complete.
For the North Wessex Downs AONB. In July 2019, all of England's AONBs formally signed up to the Colchester Declaration, which committed each AONB to deliver a nature recovery plan, setting out what action is needed to recover nature and build climate resilience. As part of this process, we have been selecting a top list of candidate species that we can work on with an ambition to remove them from their threatened status. We thought that this forum would be an opportunity to flag up some of our very special but endangered species, and we would like your input towards helping us identify our most valued wildlife. For a bit of fun, and this is where we give you the opportunity to get interactive, you will see and hear about 10 different species found in the AONB. And at the end of this presentation and over coffee break, we would like you to vote for your top 3 species that need our help but are representative of our distinctive national landscape. The stone curlew suffered a catastrophic decline from the 1930s, with only 160 species surviving. In the mid-1980s, there was a huge conservation effort which helped to double the numbers, and that now that there are probably more than 400 breeding pairs again. The North Wessex Downs is one of the bird's main strongholds. The Adonis blue butterfly is thought to have declined by 90% nationally over the last 200 years, but more recently, it seems to be spreading once again. This species is distributed along the northern escarpment of the AONB, but it occurs across the whole of our area as well, where you find tightly grazed chalk downs with horseshoe vetch. Now legally protected, water voles have undergone a decline, disappearing from 94% of their former sites. In the North Wessex Downs, we have strong populations on the River Kennet and our other chalk streams, as well as the Kennet and Avon Canal. The burnt tip orchid is confined to a scattering of sites in southern England. It is found in short chalk downland turf, but its scarce population continues to decline. It is the county flower of Wiltshire, where the largest colonies of this species can still occur. The size of a toast crumb, the Desmoulins's whirl snail. This beautiful snail is restricted to calcareous wetlands and usually borders lakes or rivers. It's famous for almost stopping the building of the Newbury bypass, at least for a while. But the Kennet and Lambourne floodplain supports one of the most extensive known populations in Northern Europe. The corn bunting favours traditionally managed mixed arable farming and is often seen perched prominently on a hedge, fence post or wire, singing away. The UK population of corn buntings fell by nearly 90% between 1970 and 2003, but there are good populations in the North Wessex Downs, and this area is one of the top 10 for this species. The Duke of Burgundy butterfly frequently frequents scrubby grassland and sunny woodland clearings, often on a northern facing slope, laying its eggs on primrose leaves or cowslips. Since the 1970s, it has declined by 84% across Britain. There are a band of records on a north to south central axis throughout the AONB. The corn buttercup is a smaller relative of the common buttercup. An arable species, it was formerly widespread throughout the south and east of England, but has declined rapidly over the last 60 years. It is classed as critically endangered and is considered to be facing an extremely high risk of extinction. The wart-biter bush cricket occurs in the North Wiltshire Downs at one of only 5 sites from across the country. It gets its name from an old Swedish practice when gentlemen allegedly kept this cricket in their top pocket to allow them to bite off any warts on their skin. Careful management by the National Trust is enabling this species to continue to thrive in the north of the AONB. And lastly, the brook lamprey is a primitive jawless fish resembling an eel, and it requires clean gravel occurs in some of our special chalk streams, especially the River Lambourne. It is rare in the UK and is on the IUCN Red List of threatened species. I hope you have enjoyed the snapshot of some of our rarer and more intriguing species that occur in the North Wessex Downs. Thank you very much for your attention.
Now it's time to have a break, but before you go, do please vote in the poll. This will appear on your screen very soon. You've just a few minutes to register your preferences. After that, a short video will be shown until we start again at 11:15. Thank you. Welcome back. During the break, we were counting your votes, and I'm sure you'll be interested to hear the results, which are as follows. In first place was the stone curlew, and then we had a draw for the second place, the Adonis blue butterfly and the burnt tip orchid. So thank you for taking part in that little fun exercise. The second half of our morning is going to focus on landscape, and in particular, what can be done to heal some of the scars created by the infrastructure that modern society demands. Our first case is in the west of the AONB near Devizes, where under the visual impact provision agreed with Ofgem, National Grid are planning to put underground a length of high voltage electricity cables that can easily spoil the glorious views. The location is Roundway Hill near the Devizes Millennium White Horse and the Civil War battlefield of Roundway Down. To tell us all about this project, we have Stuart Fox and Ben Smith of National Grid. But first, a short film.
Important historic landscape, the site of a great battle in the Civil War. And so we're going to have to work very sensitively, as we are everywhere, with local people, with local experts.
The main aim of the project is to reduce the impact of the existing overhead line infrastructure on the visual amenity of North Wessex Downs area of outstanding natural beauty. Of course, to achieve that, we can't just simply remove the pylons, we need to maintain connectivity across the grid. So an alternative solution is to remove a section of the overhead line and replace it with underground cables.
Going underground in the North Wessex Downs is an amazing opportunity to transform the landscape that we have here back to its former glory. What we have is 4.5 kilometres of overhead line that we're looking to remove. That's 11 pylons. There's potential to transform the skyline around Devizes.
Whilst we'd hoped to choose the most direct route for the cables, we also need
Apologies everyone, we seem to have our second technical hitch of the morning. Let's try starting that again. Bear with me.
National Grid gets energy around the country from gas pipelines, electricity pylons, underground cables, substations, and it's central to the transition to net zero. But building those vital energy networks sometimes means difficult decisions about building on our landscapes. It also means disruption for the communities that are affected by it.
The North Wessex Downs AONB is a particularly beautiful stretch of rolling English countryside, just north of Devizes, and we're actually going to be removing pylons and power lines from a whole stretch of that landscape. It's also a very important historic landscape, the site of a great battle in the Civil War, and so we're going to have to work very sensitively, as we are everywhere, with local people, with local experts.
The main aim of the project is to reduce the impact of the existing overhead line infrastructure on the visual amenity of North Wessex Downs area of outstanding natural beauty. Of course, to achieve that, we can't just simply remove the pylons, we need to maintain connectivity across the grid. So an alternative solution is to remove a section of the overhead line and replace it with underground cables.
Going underground in the North Wessex Downs is an amazing opportunity to transform the landscape that we have here back to its former glory. What we have is 4.5 kilometres of overhead line that we're looking to remove. That's 11 pylons. there's potential to transform the skyline around Devizes.
Whilst we'd hoped to choose the most direct route for the cables, we also need to take into consideration certain obstacles such as buildings, roads and other utilities. One of those key challenges is the busy A361, which runs to the northeast of Devizes. Another key challenge is the connection of those new cables back into the overhead line, which is facilitated by putting in place new structures at either end of the cable route. We need to make sure that we can place those structures in appropriate locations so they can be screened from the surrounding area. If you'd like to take a look at those proposed locations, then you can refer to our virtual tour online. We're looking at submitting a planning application in 2021 and also a funding application to Ofgem in the same year.
The plan that we're looking to work towards now is to continue to sort of development work on the project, but also then take forward to possible construction in 2022, and then 2023, the cables being laid in the ground, and then the removals of the pylons from the landscape in 2024.
All of the information about our projects is on our project websites. We've got digital tours of the areas that we'll be working in with click buttons to find out more about how and what we're doing and where we're doing it. Please have a look. Let us know what you think so we can improve our project.
We really do have, I think, the best chance of all of delivering restored landscapes that people will love and enjoy for generations to come.
Excellent. So hopefully everyone managed to see the video there. While Stuart's just loading up the visual tool. So I'm Ben Smith, National Grid VIP Project Manager for the South. Just quickly a recap then. So this is project in Devizes. Is one of only 4 currently underway in England and Wales. The others that we have are in Snowdonia National Park, Peak District National Park, and the Dorset AONB, and that's the most advanced one that's in construction at the moment. The Devizes project itself that we're developing currently is looking at possible removal of 12 pylons, so 4.5 kilometres of overhead line removal. Predominantly agricultural land. Hopefully, though, one of those pylons will be that is removed is within the triple SI in the covert at Roundway Hill. We've been meeting virtually with the parishes, including Devizes Town Council, Wiltshire Council, and obviously various groups as well, Ramblers, CPRE, and working closely with landowners and officers from the Wiltshire Council. And of course, Henry and his team at the AONB partnership. We had been planning to obviously be out and about a lot more, being part of the walking festival, which we do still hope to be part of as and when we can do that. And we would normally be out in the village halls. So the next best thing really is about the website and the virtual tour that we'll now be showing you. Really, it's about sharing more of this project with the community via the website. And love to hear what you think. So over to Stuart now, and hopefully the technology will be working for us.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Can I just double check people can see that? Can you see the tool?
Yes.
Yeah, good. So this is our new website, which went live this week. It's got lots of information on the project, the Going Underground and Devizes. And on the homepage, you can access this virtual tour, which when you click in, shows you an overhead map of the project. And enables you to then to zoom in on a certain area. So you click on the area here and it takes you down to ground level. You can then move around and look at the site. Look there, we're going out, looking west there towards Roud, and then round again back, looking east towards Bishop's Cannings. There are various facilities within this. You can play some video. Which I just need to share the sound, and you can see there's Henry saying a little bit.
AONBs are areas of outstanding natural beauty, which means that they.
So there's information there for people to find out more about the project, more about the AONB. You can also, at the click of a button, remove the pylons to show what the project will be, what the landscape will be like when we've taken the pylons away. So there's lots to do here. You can click on other points. That some take you to more low ground levels. This is on the promoted trail. That's the view you currently get walking up the escarpment towards the Millennium White Horse. And again, we can take away the pylons there, so you can see again what the landscape will look like with that. So there's plenty to do. There are other videos. There's information about the routes that we've chosen, and there's plenty there to explore. And we hope that it will, to some extent, replace us being in Village Falls. But we are actually planning a couple of webinars as well, public webinars. One will be on Tuesday, the 16th of February at 1 o'clock, and another at Thursday, the 25th of February at 6 p.m. in the evening. So there's information about those on our website, and we'd encourage people to come along and hear a bit more about the project at those events. Ben, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think just encourage people really to have an explore of the website, and please come back to us with any comments, observations that you may have. Obviously, and we're welcome to any questions a bit later on today as well. We'll certainly try and help you. But yeah, any questions at all, feel free to come through to us from the website.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ben, Stuart, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Our second case is in the Goring Gap at the opposite eastern end of the AONB, around the Great Western Railway line and the River Thames, where the North Wessex Downs meets the Chilterns AONB. As some of you know, Network Rail gave us and the Chilterns Conservation Board 3.75 million to mitigate the landscape damage caused by the new overhead electrification equipment and carry out landscape enhancement work along a 12-mile stretch of the line. This has given birth to Mend the Gap, a collaborative project between the two AONBs and the local Railway Action Group. The project manager is Jo Watson, and we will be welcoming her to the panel for our second Q&A session a little later. We're now going to see a short film introducing Mend the Gap.
The Goring Gap in the Thames Valley, where the Chilterns meet the North Wessex Downs. One landscape shared by two nationally designated areas of outstanding natural beauty. It has its own distinct character, a home to a wealth of wildlife habitats and a prime destination for people to enjoy the peaceful English countryside.
Hideous, it's large, it's made of metal, and it's industrial. You can see a great example of the gantries that Network Rail deployed back in about 2015 when they started the electrification of the Great Western Main Line. We got together a group of local residents. We started to get concerned and started to engage with Network Rail through a campaign. When the Railway Action Group was formed in 2015, we started to do a bit of research on Network Rail's duties in protected landscapes, and we discovered that they do have a statutory duty to the AONBs in that they have to conserve and enhance the beauty of the AONBs, and that is through the Countryside and Rights of Way Act of 2000, Section 85, which they either weren't aware of or deliberately ignored. This resulted in us in engaging with Network Rail and challenging them on several fronts. In the end, they decided to compensate the AONBs with a sum of money, which is the sum of money that underpins the Mend the Gap project that we are now engaged with and actively supporting the AONBs with.
Ultimately, at the end of the 3 years of campaigning and negotiating, £3.75 million were secured from Network Rail, and it's that £3.75 million that forms the basis of the Mend the Gap programme. Mend the Gap's vision is to soften the scars that were left behind by the electrification process and to enhance and enrich the AONBs for both the people, wildlife and local communities and visitors. The programme is a partnership between the two protected landscapes, and it's overseen by representatives of both AONBs and also the Railway Action Group. The programme area is quite focused. It's the area of the railway line that stretches between Didcot in the north and the edge of Reading to the south of here, and 3 kilometres either side of the line. It's a relatively large sum of money given the size of the area, and so that creates quite an exciting opportunity to deliver some real impacts
and to deliver against the objectives of the management plans of both of the two AONBs. Of the 3.75 million, 750,000 is earmarked for mitigation projects. Those are projects that will bring about direct benefits by reducing the visual impact of the electrification through activities such as tree planting or hedgerow restoration, which will help to mask or screen the gantries and other equipment. In addition to the direct visual benefits, we're also hoping that mitigation projects will bring about broader biodiversity benefits, for example through increasing habitat connectivity and new habitat creation, and also through building resilience in light of threats such as climate change and ash dieback. In planning the mitigation projects, we'll be working with local landowners, communities and organisations within the area, and it'll be really important to make sure that we plant the right things in the right areas. And so we will be taking into consideration the landscape character of the areas in which those particular schemes will take place, so that they sit comfortably within the surroundings. The remaining 3 million of the 3.75 million is for enhancement projects, and those are projects that will compensate for the unmitigated harm that's been done to the AONBs. So what kind of thing are we looking to fund or to support and develop? We're interested and hoping to develop projects that will enhance the landscape, but alongside that, projects that will have benefits for biodiversity and wildlife within the programme area. Opportunities to increase access and engagement and enjoyment by people of the two beautiful AONBs. There are lots of important heritage features that make this area special. We're interested in supporting projects that engage people with that heritage and that increase and improve management, and also projects that are related to sustainable tourism and the local economy. And because 3.75 million is quite a lot of money to spend in a relatively small area, we've got what we are calling added value objectives. So we're looking at projects that are strategic. We'd like to be delivering on a kind of landscape scale within this area. We'd like to strengthen partnerships so that organisations are coming together and working collaboratively. Finally, bringing new audiences. So that's people who might not currently come to the AONBs or enjoy the AONBs, but actually who have a really great opportunity here. The railway links Didcot, it links Reading and brings people out from London to this area. So we'd like to bring new audiences here.
We now come to our second question and answer session, which will focus on the National Grid presentation and the Mend the Gap film. Once again, please use the Q&A icon at the base of your screen to open the box and ask your questions. They will then be put to our new panel by Corinna Woodall. So to our panel, we have Ben Smith, Project Manager for National Grid's Visual Impact Provision, Stuart Fox, also of National Grid, Joe Watson, Programme Manager for Mend the Gap, Ian Haslam from the Railway Action Group, which has been campaigning since 2015 to mitigate the visual impact of railway electrification in the Goring Gap, and Henry Oliver, our own director. So Corinna, over to you.
Thank you. I'm just trying to encourage people to put some questions in our question and answer box. Give you a few minutes to perhaps think of something to ask our panel. But I've got a question. Is Ian
Corinna,
there? Yes?
There are a couple of questions there which I was just noting down. Should I hop in and ask and kind of go for a couple of those?
Yes, if you can see them.
I saw a couple drop in. So somebody had asked about the kinds of projects that might be funded through Mend the Gap, and hopefully I gave a bit of a flavour in the film about the range of projects that or the range of areas that we're looking to support projects in. But what we've got, particularly in relation to the enhancement side of the scheme, which is the 3 million kind of pound pot scheme is quite a broad church in terms of what we'd like to fund. So very much about access, engagement and enjoyment. So allowing people to get into the AONBs and to move through them more easily. So that might be opportunities for improvements to rights of way, or to the way that rights of way are managed or interpreted. Projects that are around things like heritage, so particularly landscape features, and that might build on the work that North Wessex Downs is already doing, which Corinna mentioned, for example, around improving management of scheduled monuments. And there's also work that the Chilterns are doing at the same time. So a bit of so some talking to Historic England about whether there might be opportunities there. Landscape projects as well, so there might be planting projects as well as the ones that are alongside the railway. And sustainable tourism and local economy. In fact, we're just with one of my colleagues at the Chilterns Conservation Board and talking about trying to put together a bit of a forum of some of the sort of sustainable businesses within the area that have a kind of sustainability angle, to have a forum with them where we kind of discuss potential projects and do a bit of a brainstorming session. So that's quite a wide selection of projects, and we're really interested in hearing from the group. And if from anybody who's listening to this, if you would like to talk to me about a potential project, then please do contact me after this.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a question here, actually just following on from that, from Judy, saying, is the funding of a reconnection of rights of way severed by electrification, is that something that could potentially be funded through Mend the Gap?
So yes, potentially. Absolutely, access, recreation, enjoyment is very much something that we're looking at. So yes, in terms of, so we're talking, for example, to Sarah Wright at the Ridgeway officer, about opportunities there. And yes, we're certainly interested in hearing from others about potential opportunities that there could be.
Okay, thank you. And I think there's another question here for you, Jo. It sounds a bit technical. One from Simon Pike, saying, why was the OLE, is that overhead line electrification, installed by Network Rail more obtrusive than the OLE on HS1? In particular, there was no need, except for expediency, for the uprights to extend above any other part of the structure. Do you have any comments on that? Or
maybe I should take that
one. I was going to say, Ian, you're best placed.
I think HS1 is the London to Dover line, I believe, and it's 2 tracks, whereas the Great Western Main Line is 4 tracks and requires more substantive equipment, unfortunately. And a good example of that is in the Cotswolds, where they also deployed OLE, but again 2 tracks and a more simple design, a sort of cantilever design, rather than the square goalpost design they employed here. So yes, they have different technology, different infrastructure for different track designs. The big contrast, I guess, is with the east main line, which was wirehead. So basically you didn't get that big structure over the top, which sort of adds to the visual degeneration in this area. And the reason they stopped doing that was because they said it was unreliable. That's not really been borne out, actually, because they've made it more reliable. We fought a long time for that, but we didn't win that battle. So there are different designs. This one we felt was unnecessary and over the top and gold plated, essentially, and has really damaged the landscape of both A and Bs. So yes, good question.
Yeah, thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. We've got a couple of questions around tree planting. So on the Mend the Gap scheme. So if planting trees to screen the power lines, will there be a clear strip for when they mature between the lines and the planting? And that's from Richard Bellamy.
Yes. So we will be very much, or we're very much kind of aware of the fact that Network Rail themselves have their own kind of guidance in terms of species that are their preferences and kind of overhanging of lines. So we certainly, any schemes will be designed with that in mind. Also, we can't anyway plant on Network Rail owned land. So all of the mitigation planting will be on land that is not owned by them, and therefore it's not directly adjacent to the line. Also, in quite a lot of instances where priority locations have been identified for the mitigation projects, so there was quite a lot of work done by landscape consultants working with a kind of a working group, including reps from the AONBs, identified where planting would have the greatest potential benefits in terms of reducing the impact of the gantries. And in fact, a lot of that is actually hedgerow restoration along kind of main routes, as opposed to tree planting, or it might be at a distance from the actual line, because that gives you the better, broader improvement rather than directly adjacent to the line.
Okay, thank you. Now I was going to move over to Roundway Hill for a couple of questions. So Ben, we've got a question here about the timescale for the Roundway Hill project.
Yes, so timescale. So we're currently in the development phase of the project. So that's been ongoing now for the past 18 months. So that's ecological surveys, baseline surveys, and we're just about to undertake our ground investigation surveys in the coming months. So you'll see sort of small vehicles out and about on the site with little drilling rigs and small excavators. So that will then enable us to hopefully do our planning submission for a bit later on this year. Hopefully summertime of this year, submit the planning application. And in line with the planning as well, we would also be submitting a funding application to the regulator as well, for the provision of money that is available to us and other transmission operators. So hopefully by the end of the year, we will then have planning permission granted, funding request accepted, and then that will enable us to then start in earnest to begin the main construction works for the project early part of next year. So really looking at construction beginning in 2022, with the pylon removal in 2024. So it's sort of a 2-year construction period. That's mostly sort of the setting up of the site to then sort of coming away from the site as well. The actual main works of the cabling would probably only be about 12 to 18 months maximum.
Fantastic, thank you. And related to that, I'm afraid the question's disappeared from my view, but I think Jill Turner must have asked a question, and Wiltshire Council have responded through Christopher Williams saying, we'll welcome input from all residents and organisations to take part in the initial stage of the consultation process, which closes on the 9th of March. So just moving on.
Corinna, can I ask a question of the undergrounding guys, please? Hi, Ben.
Yes.
Right.
Very presentation. Is it possible to say roughly how much the cost is for the 4.5 kilometres? Just in.
Yeah, no, good. Yeah.
Are there any more plans to expand the project elsewhere in the country?
So good question. So as I sort of touched on earlier on, this is one of 4 projects. In terms of costs, to give you an example of the cost of a project that we've got going on in Dorset, the Dorset project is a lot longer. It's nearly 9 kilometres. The overall cost in terms of the cabling itself and other associated works at substations that are associated to that work, the funding that was allowed for that was £116 million. You're roughly looking at around £10 million a kilometre for undergrounding. That's approximately what you're looking at for the actual cabling works and all those bits and pieces. So this project, 50, 60 million, something along those sort of lines.
And do you have plans to extend the project elsewhere?
Yeah, so we're just coming out of our current price control. So if that's where Ofgem had set a provision of £500 million available to us and the Scots to sort of make an application towards. So that's covered 3 projects so far for us, and a few others for the Scottish. Going into our next price control, which begins on the 1st of April of this year, the provision that's made available to us is £456 million. And so of those projects, we've got North Wessex Downs, We're currently in the infancy of another project as well in the Cotswolds AONB. So that is another one that we're looking towards. And in terms of a pipeline of projects, we've got a list of projects of sort of the worst offenders, as you want to call it, from a landscape visual point of view. And we'll be working with the stakeholder advisory group, who ultimately are the people that sort of decide which projects that we'll take forward in the infancy stage, and then we begin to then approach the AONBs and national parks to sort of have a conversation with them. Is it something that they want, and so can we look to develop that project up a bit more? So that's the way that we work on the major projects. In terms of other projects that are available to AONBs and national parks, we do have something called the LEI, the Landscape Enhancement Initiative. So that's where the AONBs and national parks can make applications for a smaller pot of money, so up to £200,000, to do mitigation works in areas of our overhead lines where we are not looking to do major projects, where we're not looking to take the overhead lines down. So that can include simple things from tree planting to traditional stone walls to some sort of footpath renewals, new pond creation, things that can take the eye away from our existing infrastructure and really enhance the landscapes to really bring it to life for those users. So yes, it's an ongoing commitment from us, and I think more importantly, it's an ongoing commitment from the regulator, that they have shown that there is a willingness for consumers to pay for such projects over the coming next 5-year period as well. So hopefully this will keep going now, and will keep us all enjoying the sort of the wonderful places I'll get to visit. So yes, that's a definite benefit.
Thank you for your answer there. There's an interesting question which combines both projects in a way. A question from Ivan McArdle. Going underground is removing overhead cables. Electrification of railways is introducing overhead cables. Is there an option for underground cables for railways? I don't know if that's something you feel you could.
Not one for me. I mean, you're talking electrification of lines, then, aren't you? So it's having live lines and things. So yeah, couldn't answer that one.
I'm happy to take that one. And basically, the only, it's not really undergrounding, but the third rail option, which has been used, over the last centuries for electrification, which is railways, which is quite a long, ongoing process, was discounted about, I think it was about 10 years ago under health and safety grounds. So that was the only real option, and we explored that very early on, and it was discounted by Network Rail as HSE intolerable.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Maybe we've got one here for Henry, and I think it basically refers to sort of future rounds and other opportunities, maybe through the LEI. Sorry, it's just disappeared from me. But a question from Brian Langer from Overton in Hampshire. Are there any plans to underground the pylons from the northeast of Hannington to the west of the A34, south of Beacon Hill, which are placed on the higher stretch of Downland, south of the TV mast, south of Kingsclear? So I guess that's undergrounding, but what are the other opportunities through LEI? Henry, is that something you'd like to take?
Thank you. Morning, Brian. The short answer is no, there aren't at the moment. When the VIP, the visual impact provision began, National Grid commissioned landscape assessments of the impact of all the lines across all the protected landscapes in the country. And if you like, there's a league table of just how bad they are. And the second worst one, I think, in our area is probably the one up in Ian's neck of the woods, south of Chelsea in Oxfordshire, where historically part of it is already underground in the Goring Gap, but then it emerges. We are hopeful that with Ben and his colleagues' help, we might actually get another scheme at some point if VIP continues. In the interim, we are interested in the Landscape Enhancement Initiative that Ben described. It's had a few teething problems in terms of the process. Those have been addressed, and there is a new LEI launching very shortly. in fact, possibly already launched, Ben. But there is a kind of issue here about whether you want to put a lot of effort into that when there is the prospect that you might be able to put the lines underground in the longer term, which we obviously need to address. And also a lot of the things you can do to distract the eye from very big pylons in the landscape might be in tension with the landscape character of the area, particularly if you're talking about a very open downland area like round Beacon Hill. So we're certainly interested in looking at the options, but we don't have any definite plans at the moment.
I think just very quickly on that, and the LEI, we have got a workshop on the 10th of February, which has been, hopefully everyone's received invites from the OMBs and national parks and their partners to attend that. And yeah, that's really launching the new process, the streamlined process to get away from some of those issues that we have had over the past few years. Yeah.
Thank you, Ben. I'll welcome that. Comment from Catherine Graham Harrison. She says the National Grid scheme is brilliant. On Mend the Gap, Network Rail has given us a significant sum, but have they also committed to halting their savage tree clearance scheme elsewhere along the line? Is that something for Ian or Joe?
Either. I'll start. So no would be the quick answer, I think. I mean, in terms of Mend the Gap and the negotiations and discussion that were done specifically in relation to this stretch of the line, it was very, very specific about, primarily from the AOMB's perspective, and kind of where we've ended up. It was very specifically kind of focused on the actual electrification equipment, albeit that then the process of putting them in also caused significant harm. And so part of the enhancement and mitigation projects that we'll be funding will help to address that. What I would say is that in terms of the wider discussions with Network Rail on kind of ongoing projects and what happens next, we have had conversations, so Henry and I, and also Howard Davies from the National Association of AOMBs, had some dialogue and conversation recently with the Director of Planning at Network Rail, and they've expressed willingness and interest in engaging in a more strategic way with the protected landscapes as they move forward and as they start to plan new projects. So they are, for example, going to be undertaking a design review of OLE of the equipment at some point in the slightly unspecified future, and we've obviously expressed an interest in being involved with that, and we're working towards, or in discussion about some sort of an MOU or MOA between Network Rail and the National Association, which would slightly formalise that interest from them in engaging more proactively with the protected landscapes.
Great, that sounds really, that could be really helpful. Thank you, Joe. And I've got one more question, maybe just time for one or two more questions. Quick one probably again for you, Joe, from John Haggerty. As a landowner with land adjoining GWR, I have not been made aware of the Mend the Gap. How will you be opening up bids and projects within the area? Is that something you could just explain quickly for us?
Yes, John, we would love to hear from you. It's interesting. So we have made contact with some landowners, and there are some that we have contact details for and that we know of. Others we don't, or I don't, and we don't have direct contact details for. So actually, that process of exploring who owns which areas, and particularly the ones that are priority locations, we are really keen to hear from, and to get in touch with you and to talk to you about the scheme. We have just renewed an agreement, or got a new agreement with the Rural Payments Agency, which provides us with data, or greater level of data than we have previously had about land ownership, which hopefully will also speed up that process of getting in touch with landowners. So I would be absolutely delighted to talk to you and to pick your brains about adjacent landowners as well.
just to back that up, there is a dedicated page on the Chilterns Conservation Board website, which discusses Mend the Gap and shows the criteria for the projects that we're hoping to achieve. So yes, if you go to that, then you get more information on that, but please contact us directly as well.
And it's also on the North Wessex Downs website.
Right.
Yep. And in fact, if you use the main Mend the Gap web address, which is www.mendthegap.uk, you'll go to the pages.
Thank you very much to our panel. I'm afraid we've run out of time and we've got so many more questions that we could have answered. We will do our best to provide everybody with the information that has just been cited after the conference closes. But I now need to hand it back over to Ted Hiscox for his closing remarks. So thank you very much, everybody. And if you could shut down your videos and mute yourselves.
Thank you, Corinna. At the beginning, I promised you a special guest to round off our morning. I'm delighted to say that she's managed to reach us, and we're greatly honoured that she's been able to find the time to say a few live words. So it gives me enormous pleasure to introduce the Chief Executive of Natural England and resident of the North Wessex Downs, Marion Spain. Marion has been at Natural England for the last couple of years, and before that, she was Chief Executive of Plant Life International, the UK's leading wild plant conservation charity. Marion, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Ted. Yes, you have declared my interest for me that I live in the North Wessex Downs, so I keep a very close eye on how the AONB is getting on from the comfort of my own home, or occasionally the comfort of the Ridgeway. I found myself thinking, when was I last involved in a North Wessex Downs event? And I'm ashamed to say, I think it's about 20 years ago, and I honestly can't remember. But we were launching the body that we're now seeing the success of. We launched the management plan and the management forum, and the recognition that the North Wessex Downs was not just something that individual local authorities needed to deal with in their planning policies, but it was a landscape that needed collective action, collective vision, and collective enhancement. So I've been really thrilled to hear how things have got on. I've kept in touch, of course, in between, but I haven't actually been to one of your events since then, I don't think. And I'm very conscious that coming last, nobody's going to get a right to reply. So I'm going to say what I think. And I hope, though, that even though we can't discuss it today, you can keep in touch with Natural England through our area teams and so on, and keep up that important dialogue. Because what I'm going to say is, I think the AONB is doing a great job, including the work I've heard today. As somebody that uses that rail line from Pangbourne Station, I certainly notice those gantries, and when I'm walking in that area, so it's been really good to hear the part of the discussion I have had. But my slightly challenging comment is that as a resident, most of my friends and neighbours, even the ones that know what I do for a job, I don't know if they understand the AONB, and if I hear them talking about it, it's mainly in the planning context. Oh, we're in AONB, that development can't happen, that kind of comment. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. So I hope that over the coming years, we can all, Natural England and everybody involved in the forum and everybody on this call, can try and move that narrative to a different place, so that everybody who lives and works and visits in the AONB is perhaps thinking about three things and talking about three things. What can we all do, whether we're farmers, businesses, gardeners, house owners, what can we do to make the AONB a bit wilder, a bit greener, a bit more nature? You know, what can we do to really make nature thrive in this place? What can we do to make sure that people who live here, who go to school here, who visit here, really benefit, really get those health and well-being benefits from being able to access the countryside in such a beautiful place, whether they want to walk the whole Ridgeway or whether they just want a bit of green space on the edge of their village or a forest school. And let's also make sure that we have an honest and open dialogue about development, and really think about what can we do to enhance homes, enhance businesses, and make sure this is an AONB where development allows businesses and people to thrive, but also contributes to the beauty of this wonderful place. So there's my challenge, and I'm sorry you don't have a chance to discuss it or disagree with me.
Marion, thank you for those words of encouragement, challenge and interest. And thank you so much for all you do at Natural England and for your time today. As we come to the close of our forum, there are 2 points for everyone to note and action. Next week, everyone will be emailed the link to the recording of this event, and we would be hugely grateful if you could spend a few minutes completing a survey to gather your views on this event. The questions will come up on your screen as you leave the forum shortly. We sincerely hope that for the next forum, we'll be able to return to the normal format, but if you need to repeat this morning's arrangements, it would be most helpful to know what you thought about them. So all that remains is for me to thank you all for your attendance this morning, to our guest speakers and panelists, Charlotte Hitchmo, Andy Smith, Ben Smith, Stuart Fox, Joe Watson, Ian Haslam and Marion Spain, our home team of Henry, Corinna, Becky, Jackie, Claire and Sue, and special thanks to Anne and Anna, who've enabled all that we've seen and heard. Goodbye.